Good evening, and welcome back to the channel. Please be sure to keep hitting the like button and comment down below on what you thought of tonight's story. Now, let's get into it. Bear with me. I know this sounds crazy. 2 weeks ago, I woke up in a hospital bed. They told me I was in a car accident. I don't remember the accident, just a blinding flash of light. Since being discharged, things have felt wrong, not just slightly off, deeply off, like the world is wearing a mask, and I'm the only one who can see the seams. Little things were off at first, easy to dismiss, but today, something happened, something I can't explain, and now I know for sure, whatever this is, it isn't just in my head. This is real, and I'm scared as hell. At first, nothing seemed too weird. I'd never spent a night in a hospital before, so waking up in a sterile, fluorescent lit room was bound to feel unsettling. I brushed it off. My parents were more doting than usual, but for people whose son had almost died, they took it surprisingly well, at least until we got to the car. That's when the concern cracked, and the disappointment seeped through. They scolded me for wrecking my 2003 Saturn crap box, calling me reckless. The words sounded right, worried, even empathetic, but something was off. My mum's face kept shifting, like she couldn't settle on how she was supposed to feel. My dad, though, he barely moved. He sat rigid, staring straight ahead, as if turning his head wasn't an option. But I could feel him watching me. His gaze lingered in the rear-view mirror, heavy and cold. Each time I glanced up, I'd catch his eyes for just a split second, before he snapped them back onto the road. I knew he never really looked away. After the 6th time, I stopped looking away too. The mirror became a silent one-way standoff as I waited for him to scold me through it again. He didn't so much as glance at it for the rest of the drive. It was a short drive. None of this was a cause for concern, really. Nothing that followed was all that crazy, but when we got home, I felt a shift, coming from the harsh fluorescence of the hospital and the golden stretch of road outside. I wasn't prepared for the cool dimness of the house. It wasn't dark exactly. Mum always kept the shades open. She liked the light, but now they weren't quite shut. Just not open enough, like someone had hesitated halfway and left them there. My family didn't linger. After some pleasantries, Mum disappeared into the master bedroom. Dad went back to work, and I was left alone on the living room couch. I popped a Tylenol, took a few hits from my pen in the bathroom, and settled in. The rest of the day was mostly silent, aside from the occasional sound of Mum's bedroom door opening and closing. I wasted time scrolling on my phone, barely aware of the shifting sunlight, until a beam stretched across the room and hit my eyes. I turned from my pillow to the armrest, bought myself another 20 minutes. Then another beam crept up, warming my feet like some kind of passive-aggressive warning from the sun. All right, message received. I sighed, peeled myself off the couch, and mumbled, "Screw it, you win," before dragging myself to my room. I was asleep before I could think too much about it. The week that followed was unusual, to say the least. It was summer break, and normally I'd be stocking shelves at Walmart or messing around with my friends, but doctor's orders were pretty straightforward. You've got a concussion. Don't be an idiot. No standing for long periods. No heavy lifting. No unnecessary risks. Fine by me. I got a doctor's note, a couple of weeks off, and a temporary escape from the joys of minimum wage labour. It wasn't the end of the world. Part-time jobs come and go. For now, I just had some headaches and a free pass to lay low. Better than risking something worse, whether it was from dreading work or from one of my friends intentionally checking a basketball into my skull. Just because we're over-competitive degenerates, I didn't really care to go outside much. The weather hadn't been as sunny as the first day I got back. Clouds hung low, thick and unmoving, like they were pressing down on the neighbourhood. Even when the sun did break through, it was this weak, watery light that barely seemed to touch the ground. It just made staying inside feel more justified, so I did. I moved the Xbox from the basement to my room. Normally, that would have been a no-go, but if anyone asked, I'd just plead the concussion card and call it a win. No one ever commented on it, which felt strange in a way, like they should have, but didn't. I would just hold up, gaming, eating, zoning in front of Skyrim lore videos in the living room, whatever. Aside from family dinners, I didn't talk to my parents that much. The conversations at the table were dull, barely conversations at all. Dad was working later than usual, often slipping away right after eating. Mum was around, I knew that much. I heard her, the bedroom doors opening and closing, the creaking floorboards when she walked. The soft, swift of her feet brushing across the carpet upstairs. But I rarely saw her, not in the kitchen, not in the living room, not even when I grabbed snacks at night. Come to think of it, I don't think I saw her downstairs, aside from dinner. Some groceries spoiled, which was weird, because Mum was always on top of that kind of thing. When I pointed it out, she took me shopping, which was actually kind of nice. I got way more say in what we stocked the fridge with than usual. That was a win. But as we wandered the aisles, I noticed something. People were staring at me, not in a casual, passing way, intensely, like they were trying to memorize my face, or maybe like they weren't sure what they were looking at. Each time I caught someone, they snapped their head away, like they hadn't been watching at all. But the feeling stayed. Not a single person looked like they could hold a normal expression on their faces. It was like they shifted through raw emotions during the most mundane tasks. I began to feel in danger, and worse, I started to notice something else. As Mum and I passed people, I swore I could hear them pivot to watch me after we walked by. I never actually saw it happen, but I could hear it. The soft squeak of a shoe turning, the faint rustle of fabric shifting. I wanted to ask Mum if she noticed anything, but the words stuck in my throat. If she hadn't, I'd sound crazy. If she had, I didn't want to know. I tried to shrug it off. I'd been a complete goblin for the past week, barely keeping up with shaving. And yeah, my facial hair was patchy as hell. Maybe I just looked like a mess. Maybe I was imagining things. Whatever. When I got back home, I hopped on the Xbox, made plans with some friends for later in the week, and told myself I'd get cleaned up before then. Everything was fine. Everything was fine. 2 days passed. Nothing noteworthy. Just my growing awareness of how off everything felt. Mum was moving around more. At least, I think she was. I'd hear her footsteps, soft shuffling noises that always seemed to stop right outside my door. The first few times I brushed it off. Maybe she was just passing by. Maybe she was listening for signs that I was awake. But the more I paid attention, the more I felt it deliberate. The house was dim, sure, but my room wasn't. I kept my bay window shades open, letting in just enough light to make it feel normal, or at least less like the rest of the house. The hallway outside, though, it always has shadows. There was only one time of day where light from the high windows in the living room even touched my door, and it wasn't now. That's why I knew I shouldn't have seen anything, and yet I did. I heard her, that same soft shuffle. I glanced over at the edge of my bed, half expecting nothing, just another trick of my nerves. But for a split second, I saw them, her toenails, just at the edge of the door. The instant I registered them, they shot back, too fast. So fast, it was like they hadn't been there at all. The carpet, where they had been left the faintest depression before, slowly rising back into place. My stomach twisted. Okay, that was it. No more dab pen. No more convincing myself I wasn't tripping out when clearly I was seeing something. I waited, listened, heard her shuffle away. Her door clicked shut. I exhaled, rubbed my face, and stood up. Enough of this. I needed to get out of this house. Needed to see my friends, James, Nikki D, and Tyler. The goal was simple. Sober up, ground myself, and maybe, just maybe, bring up what was going on. Over Xbox, they'd all sounded completely normal. I'd only mentioned a few things in passing, nothing that set off any alarms for them. Most of our talks just had been about girls from our school, memes, and talking crap in Rainbow Six Siege lobbies. Maybe I was just overthinking it. Maybe everything was fine. But as I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere upstairs, Mum was listening. Obviously, driving wasn't an option. My car was totaled. My parents handed me $250 for the scrap it was apparently worth, and that was that. So I dusted off my old bike from the shed in the back. I didn't even glance at the house on my way out. I didn't need to see my creepy-ass mum peeking from the upstairs window like a horror movie extra. If I did, I'd probably swerve straight into traffic just to avoid dealing with it. Instead, I shoved the thoughts down and let myself believe, for just a little longer, that I was just hallucinating. That was safer. That was better. Besides, my odds were good. I still had headaches. I was still a little stoned. I was still taking Tylenol. Put it all together, and maybe my brain was just running like a laggy Xbox. I rolled up to the high school football field in about 20 minutes and hopped the fence. Everyone was already there. James, Nicky D and Tyler, and what followed. It was awesome. The dap-ups were a little stiff at first, but once we got going, everything fell into place. We had a pump, a football, which lasted about 10 minutes before it needed air again, and a frisbee. The sun was bright for the first time since I'd left the hospital, and for the first time in days, I felt good. I'd shaved. I was surrounded by my friends, and I started to think, no, I started to hope, that maybe I'd just been missing out on real, in-person socialization. I almost fell for it. I almost let myself believe everything was fine. We played for hours. Eventually, we were wiped, ready to debrief before heading home. I was closest to the corner of the field where the old water pump was, so I went first, yanked the lever, let the water rush out, cupped my hands, and drank. The others chatted behind me, their voices blending from the soft splash of the pump. Refreshed, I wandered back to where we'd all been playing frisbee, flopped onto the grass, and pulled out my phone. The sun was brutal, washing out the screen. I tilted it, angling downward to block the glare, squinting as I reached for the power button, and then I froze, because in the black reflection of my phone screen, I saw them, all three of them, standing at the water pump, staring at the back of my head. James and Taylor's faces were wrong. Their jaws hung open, too wide, far past what should have been possible. It wasn't just slack, it was distorted. Their bottom lips curled downward, just enough to reveal rows of teeth. Their heads tilted forward, eyes locked onto me, shoulders hunched, arms dangling too loosely at their sides. They looked like something out of a nightmare, like The Scream, but worse. Nicky wasn't as bad. He was staring too, but his face shifted, the same way my mum's did when she picked me up from the hospital, like he couldn't wait to get it right. And yet, the conversation hadn't stopped. Their voices came out perfectly, flowing like normal, but James and Tyler weren't moving their mouths. The water pump was still running. I had my phone up for maybe a second, but my whole body jerked like I'd been stabbed. My fingers fumbled, and my phone slipped from my hands, landing in the grass with a soft thud. Nicky asked if I was good. I could barely think, barely breathe. Beads of sweat formed on my temples. I swallowed hard, forced myself a smile, forced out the words, Yeah, I'm great. And I turned to face them, normal. They looked normal. Everything was normal, but my stomach twisted into knots, because I knew what I saw, and for the first time since I got home, I realised I had nowhere to run. You sure you're good? I can't even remember who asked me that. Yeah, I'm good, man. My head's just pounding. I think I should go home. That part was true. It was pounding. Nicky frowned. You need a ride? Internally, I screamed no. Externally, I said, No thanks. I'll be fine. Appreciate it though. The other two laughed. The tension cracked just a little. We all started getting ready to part ways, but I dragged it out, paced around their cars, made jokes, tossed the football over the hoods, anything to stall. I kept stealing glances at the mirrors and windows, waiting for another glimpse of what was under their veils. Nothing. The first few times, I swore I saw their eyes dart away from mine in the reflections, like they knew what I was doing, Then it was like they just stopped looking towards me altogether. No matter how I angled myself, how fast I glanced, I never caught them like I had on the field. And yet, looking back, I can't shake the feeling. Like they knew exactly where I was looking. Like they had just found ways to stare at me from difficult angles without me ever catching their eyes. I'm just glad they let me go home. I don't know what the end goal is, but I feel like I'm being bled out, played with, before I'm eaten. I managed to steady my breathing on the ride back. As I pulled up to my house, I veered towards the spare garage, an old, detached structure, barely used except for storage. I figured I'd leave my bike in there for now, just so I wouldn't have to linger outside any longer than necessary. I wheeled up to the side door, gripping the Russell handle. The lock had long since broken, and with a firm push, the door groaned open. Dust and stale air hit me first, the scent of old cardboard and forgotten junk. The space was dim, faintly illuminated by streetlights filtering through the grimy windows. I rolled my bike inside, carefully not to trip over scattered tools and warped furniture, when I froze. In the centre of the garage, right where it shouldn't have been, was my car, perfectly intact, not totaled, not even scratched. My breath caught in my throat. I took a slow step forward, fingers brushing the hood. Cold, real, tangible. The last I'd heard of this car was being told it had been wrecked, scrapped. My parents handed me $250 and said that's all it was worth. So why was it here? I circled to the driver's side and peered inside. The keys weren't in the ignition, but they dangled from the dash. Something was off. The seat, normally adjusted to fit me, was pushed all the way back, like someone much taller had been sitting there. A low tremor crawled up my spine. The car, despite being untouched, was covered in dust. How long was I in hospital? It doesn't matter. It was getting dark. I did a quick fluid check, ran my hands over the tires, making sure it would be ready if I needed it, then jogged back to my house. But the second I stepped through the front door, it hit me again. Rapid, aggressive shuffling, door slam. Then, in a voice so casual, too normal.
Honey, you missed dinner. Want me to heat some up for you?
It's okay, Mom. I'll handle it. The living room TV was blue screened, casting a sickly glow over the floor plan. I didn't dare mess with my parents' setup. At this point, they had to know I was onto them, and I would do nothing to disturb the peace. I grabbed some snacks from the fridge, went straight to my room, locked the door, dug out my old iPod Gen 6 from middle school, buried in a shoebox, and set it to charge. For a while, I just sat there, listening. It was too quiet. I FaceTimed the iPod from my phone, hesitating, debating whether I should even leave my room. The upstairs layout was simple. 4 rooms. Mine was first on the left at the top of the stairs. My parents' was last on the right. At the very end, a closet where we kept detergent and towels. My bathroom was the last door on the left. The plan was simple. A strategic iPod drop-off during my next bathroom break. I executed flawlessly, waiting for the next round of patrolling before slipping out. I cracked the closet door, just enough to give my iPod a view down the hall, plugged the charger in beneath the bottom shelf, and left it there, a hidden eye, a way to see what my parents really looked like when they thought no one was watching. I almost regret this decision. It seemed fine when I got back into my room and locked the door. I quietly angled my dresser in front of it, wedging my desk chair as tightly as I could under the handle. I heard my parents' door fly open, slamming into the inside wall of their bedroom. By the time I grabbed my phone, she was already there, standing at the end of the hall, facing my door, swaying. She was past the weird shifting face that Nikki had. Whatever this is, there's stages. Her jaw wasn't just distended, it was stretched beyond its limits. The skin pulled so tight it dangled with every sway of her body. Even from here, I could see the bags under her eyes. Not just dark circles, but loose, sagging folds that drooped to her upper lip, exposing way too much dry pink eyelid. Her hair, thin and patchy, clung to her scalp with a greasy sheen from the glow of the living room TV and the dim light spilling from the master bedroom. Her arms didn't hang. Her elbows were bent at stiff, unnatural 90-degree angles. Shoulders hunched forward, wrists limp, long bony fingers dangling. The only way I knew it was my mum was the pyjama top. It clung to her sharp skeletal frame, stretched over the ridges of her spine, hanging loose around her frail shoulders. She leaned in, pressed against the door, her head tilted, slow, deliberate, like she could see through the wood, tracking exactly where I was. And then, a whisper.
Honey, are you awake?
Her mouth didn't move, lips stretched thin, jaw unhinged and frozen in that grotesque, slack-jawed state. But the words came anyway, perfectly clear, perfectly human.
I know you're up, honey. I just heard you moving.
Yeah, I just moved some furniture around. I didn't like where my TV was. A pause. Then the whisper began again, perfectly clear, perfectly human.
Can I see?
My throat tightened. Tomorrow, I lied. I'm naked right now. I don't want to get dressed. Please, please, please work. I was frozen, my face glued to my phone screen, not daring to look away from the grainy FaceTime feed. My breath barely made a sound. Then, finally.
Okay, tomorrow then.
As she spoke, something shifted in the furthest, darkest corner past the stairs. At first, I thought it was just a shadow, but then an arm, thin, brittle, dangling down from the ceiling like a puppet on cut strings. Another arm followed, then a body, slow and deliberate, lowering itself down the wall. My stomach turned to ice. Dad, did he ever even leave the house? Was he already this far along when he picked me up from the hospital with Mum? None of it mattered. He moved with absolute silence, clambering up the stairs as Mum whispered one last time.
Good night, son. I love you.
Then Dad shuffled past her, same stiff, unnatural cadence Mum had been moving with for weeks. If I weren't staring straight at him, I would have sworn it was still her. He went to the master bedroom, closed the door, then, without making a single noise, he came back. A trick I would have surely fell for if I hadn't been watching them this whole time. He ended right behind where she was standing, And that brings me to now. For the past 2 hours, they've been outside my door. Every move I make, they track it. Through the wood, through the silence. It's 3:02 a.m. If I can just make it to daylight without passing out, I think I can open the bay window and jump. After that, straight to the spare garage, grab the car and get the hell out of town. I don't know how far this stuff can spread, but I can't stay here. Wait, I hear something. Oh God, they're getting on the ground, lowering themselves, peeking under the door. I might have to go right now. Oh God, I'll update this when I'm safe.